Assalamu alaikum. Hello, dear friends. I'm going to make this video in English because I have received so many emails and inquiries regarding my latest visit in China, in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. My visit in Xinjiang was sponsored by the Information Office of the People's Government of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. I went to Xinjiang on my request because I contacted the Chinese authorities. As a journalist that I am and a person who deals with issues of Muslims in the world, for a long time the issue of Xinjiang and of Uyghuristan or East Turkistan, whatever people call it, was a matter of mystery for me. I wanted to know what is really going on in Xinjiang, and I wanted to myself verify the different reports that we hear in the media about what is going on in Xinjiang region. Now, we were invited to Xinjiang and we arrived there. We arrived in Urumqi on the 16th of August, if I'm not wrong. And we participated in a program called the Media Executive Seminar for countries along the Silk Road economic belt. The idea was that, the government of the autonomous government of Xinjiang wanted in a way to present to us as foreign journalists the situation in Xinjiang, the plans and of the government of China to develop its road and belt initiative. And in a way, we as journalists wanted to understand what is this initiative by the Chinese government. And on the other hand, we wanted in a way to check how are the inter-ethnic and inter-religious situation in this region of China. We had a number of lectures when we were in Urumqi. These lectures were given to us by different Communist Party officials. They explained to us a number of issues, for example, the history of Xinjiang, the issue of terrorism and why the Chinese government was so worried about the terrorist attacks that they had suffered in the past years. And also something that was very important that the Chinese authorities wanted to let us know was about the relation, or in a way how the Uyghur and the Islamic community was doing in Xinjiang. For doing that, different Chinese lecturers, they gave to us different presentations, and we were also presented with a collection of white papers concerning Xinjiang by the Chinese government. What drew my attention during these lectures that we had was that in the way the Chinese authorities, not only that they perceive Xinjiang as an integral part of China, but moreover, the official narrative that the Chinese government has is that Xinjiang has always been Chinese, and that the Uyghur ethnic community that lives there is an immigrant community. The Chinese authorities were very worried by the terrorist attacks that have happened in Xinjiang in the past years. And for this reason, they wanted to present to us as foreign journalists that what the Chinese government is doing in the name of the fight against terrorism. During our visit, especially in Urumqi, we visited factories, companies, and state officials in a way. They try to show to us the successive economic history of the Xinjiang area and especially Urumqi. And some Communist Party members who presented to us, they wanted to show to us that the government of China is taking care of Xinjiang, which was an underdeveloped region in China, and they were doing their best in order to improve the life of the people of this region. In the presentations that we had, the Chinese presenters, who were mainly Han Chinese, we didn't have any Uyghur or people of other ethnicities presenting to us, they portrayed in a way Islam as the problem that Xinjiang has. Even though the authorities who presented to us, they were very careful to clarify to us time after time that they have no problem with Islam. In the white papers that the Chinese government has released, they in a continuous manner show that Islam is not a religion of China, is not a religion that shares part in the, how can I put it, in the makeup of the Chinese culture, but they are continuously showing that Islam is a foreign religion brought by Arabs, imposed by force on the Uyghurs, and the historical narrative that the Chinese authorities were building through their white papers and presentations was that Islam was a religion that was imposed on the Chinese and the Uyghurs, and that the original religions of China were Buddhism, Taoism, Nestorianism, and what have you. The authorities of Xinjiang government tried to explain to us the policies that China has taken in the last years in order to fight terrorism. We had papers, like white papers, that were presented to us, which were explaining the vocational education and training institutions in Xinjiang. These institutions, in my videos, for those who have seen them, I have labeled them as schools of re-education. The Chinese government calls them vocational education and training schools, while I choose to name them re-education schools. What I mean by this is that we had such schools in Albania during the time of communism, and we used to call them schools of re-education, but what they were, in fact, they were like prisons where our government was sending little boys and girls who were underage and who could not be sent to prison. And in the time, the communist government of Albania, when they wanted to punish a child who was underage, they were locking them into these educational schools, which in fact were prisons. The government officials of Xinjiang, who invited us and covered all our expenses, and for this we are very thankful to them, tried to show to us, the foreign journalists, that everything was fine in Xinjiang or in Uyghuristan, and that these vocational schools that the Chinese government had built were nothing but were just schools. And the Uyghurs who were detained into these schools or centers, they were very happy and glad to be there. We were presented even with papers describing how China is fighting terrorism and extremism, and we were sent to museums in Urumqi, because we visited Urumqi, Aksu and Kashgar, who were the main cities, and in all these visits we were sent to state museums where the Chinese authorities, in a way, they tried to give us a picture of what Xinjiang is. In these visits and in the lectures that we had, the official narrative that we received was that number one, Xinjiang has never been Turkestan, that Islam is a foreign religion which was brought in this region by the Arabs and the Turks, and that, Uyghurs are migrants in Xinjiang, which means they are foreigners, like you have Moroccan immigrants in Italy, and that this region historically belonged to the Chinese. In the museums in Urumqi and in Aksu that we were sent, the whole narrative that the communist government, the communist government of China was depicting was an imperial narrative. So the Chinese authorities, even though they claim to be communists, and according to Marx, the communists, they have no nation because all the proletarians are brothers. The official narrative that the Chinese government has adopted is an imperial narrative, whereby they were showing the history of the oppressive rulers of the past in China, the Qing and the Ming and what have you dynasties, as being the predecessors of the current government of China. So this was something very striking for me, because while China pretends to be a socialist and a Marxist and a communist country, on the other hand, in their historical narrative, the historical narrative that China has adopted is an imperial and capitalist and the bourgeoisie narrative, where in a way the communist government of China is in a way glorifying the kings and the emperors that China had before, which communism was supposed to remove from power. In our group, we were a group of journalists who were coming from Afghanistan, Albania, Bangladesh, India, Japan, Kazakhstan, Republic of Korea, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Qatar, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Sweden, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. Apart from being shown this part of imperialist history of China, as I mentioned before, a major concern for our Chinese friends was for us as journalists to show and portray to the world that things are just fine in China, that the Chinese authorities are not persecuting the Uyghur majority in Xinjiang, and that the relations are quite great. However, because when I went to China, my desire was in a way to break the Western narrative, which in a way tries to show the situation in Xinjiang as a very desperate situation, as a situation where the Chinese Han authorities are carrying out a genocide against the native Uyghur population. So in the first day when I was in or the second day, I mean, after I arrived in Urumqi, I even made a video that I posted on my YouTube channel called the Muslims of China Report from Xinjiang. And I said that things look quite nice in here because I didn't see any conflict, I didn't see any concentration camp, I didn't see any riot. And in the first video that I made 6 days ago, today is 25 of August 2019, and now that I'm speaking, I'm back in Tirana, the capital of Albania, at my home. So in the first video that I made 6 days ago, I said that things are fine here. We were in Urumqi, we went around, we saw Uyghurs, we saw Han Chinese, we saw too much progress and prosperity, and I said, what the heck are the Western media saying? The situation here is just great. But what happened is that in the day that I made this report, we were sent to the major bazaar of Urumqi. We were sent them for shopping, and our Chinese friends, they moved us around and they were showing to us people, be them Uyghurs or Kazakhs or whatever, and Chinese dancing and being happy. But when we went to the bazaar, what I noticed is that this historical bazaar with the mosque with 4 minarets in its center, the mosque was closed. So I was very surprised why the mosque, and such a beautiful mosque, be closed, and this historical place be turned into a bazaar. I crossed the street, I went to another mosque which was belonging to Hui Chinese Muslims. That mosque was also closed. Then, in the day after this visit in Urumqi, the authorities sent us to, they also sent us to visit different institutions in Urumqi. We visited the theater of Urumqi. We were presented with Uyghur songs and dancing, and they also sent us to the Islamic Institute of Xinjiang, where they presented us with Sheikh Abdul Rakib bin Tumer Diaz. Now, in the Islamic Institute, from what we understood, was that through Sheikh Abdul Rakib bin Tumer Diaz, the Chinese authorities were trying to create a Chinese Islam. Sheikh Abdul Rakib, who was shouting and screaming a lot, was in a way, showed to us in a way what his institute was doing. In few words, Sheikh Abdul Rakib was taking different imams from different provinces, bringing them into his institute and teaching them Chinese and the laws of China, and in a way preparing these imams to be loyal citizens of the Republic of China. I made a number of interviews with these imams. Even when we went in their institute, in a way I wanted to see how much they knew for Islam, and people who have seen my videos, they have seen, for example, how I tell them Salam Alaikum and they respond Alaikum Salam, how they call the Azan, recited the Quran, etc. So, in a few words, Imam Abdul Rakib was trying to create a new generation of loyalist imams to the government of China, who were going to take care of Muslim religious infrastructure in Xinjiang. So far so good, because in a way what the Chinese are doing with the Islamic Institute is something that is randomly done in many countries. For example, in Austria, the Austrians are trying to create Austrian Islam. In France, the French are trying to create French Islam. And the same story is repeating everywhere in the world of nations where we live nowadays. The governments who are in a bit suspicious to Islam, many non-Muslim governments, they try to create their own Islam. So, so far everything was fine. And then what happened was that one day after, we were sent to the city of Aksu. In the city of Aksu, we visited different institutions. We were sent near to the Gobi Desert, and we were presented with the great effort that the government of China has done in order to plant trees and turn the desert into a land in Aksu. And in a way, we were impressed by the massive work, which in my opinion was very torturous and was done for free, voluntary, by the people of Aksu, to turn the desert into a forest. I mean, it was something that impressed us a lot, something that I have seen to have been done only in Israel, which requires so much effort, money, blood, human resources, which for our surprise in China, these things were coming free. When we were in Aksu, we went into a farm there, where our Chinese guests, they treated us with things that they were producing in their farms. And among others, I met even a girl called Aisha Mahmouti. Now, when we were in Urumqi, the idea that the government gave to us, government officials gave to us, was that Uyghurs are Muslims. So when I went to this farm, I wanted in a way to show and to understand how are the inter-ethnic relations, inter-religious relations going on in Aksu. I didn't have too much idea of what has happened in the past in Aksu, riots, clashes, etc. So I interviewed this girl, Aisha Mahmouti. Her name was Aisha, like the wife of Prophet Muhammad. Her surname was related to the name of Prophet Muhammad. But to my surprise, she didn't even know how to, or at least she was afraid to respond to the Salam Alaikum, and she told me that she is atheist, she believes in Marxism and other things. After interviewing Aisha Mahmouti, we were sent to Wensu County Vocational Training School. This was one of these centers of re-education or concentration camp, or call it whatever. And we were presented to Uyghurs who were detained in this center. The center was in the middle of the desert. It was a kind of Alcatraz. And by its appearance, now we were expecting here to find some criminals and terrorists and killers and people who were dangerous to the society. When we went there, the authorities, they presented us with a concert. These poor boys and girls who were being held there since many years, they were taught to dance, to make Uyghur dance, Chinese dance, and Western dance. And the authorities wanted us to film them only dancing and laughing and smiling and singing. They were all speaking Chinese, even though they were Uyghurs. Because one of the intentions of the Chinese government with these centers, detention centers that they have, is what we understood from our visit. They want to forcefully Sinize the Uyghurs. They want to forcefully teach them Chinese. From our Chinese friends who, accompanied us throughout our visit, I understood that a major concern for the Chinese government was that this region, Xinjiang, was largely not Chinese. The Uyghurs, the Kazakhs, the Kyrgyz, the Tatars, and what have you, they were speaking Turkish dialects. They were Muslims. Their lifestyle was much different from that of the Han Chinese. And even though since the creation of the People's Republic of China, the Chinese have continuously colonized this region, still the Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities constituted the majority. And moreover, they were not integrated into the Chinese system. Now, what we understood during our visit in Xinjiang was that all state, or almost all state authority and power was at the hand of the Han Chinese. So, especially in Urumqi and in Aksu, we saw only Han Chinese commanding and ruling over the Uyghurs. And on the other hand, what was happening in Xinjiang is that we had two parallel societies. One, we had the Han Chinese who were ruling, managing businesses and having control of the region. And on the other hand, we saw the Uyghurs who were in a way discriminated and had built their own parallel society where Islam and their Muslim identity was a major component of their identity. But what we understood when we visited this Wensu County Vocational Training School was that these Uyghur kids who were taken in this center were being forcefully Sinized. When I went there, and I insisted because our authorities, they were very nervous with me. They didn't want me to make many questions. And I had a very horrible time with them, fighting and struggling and demanding for them to let me make questions. Because as a journalist that I was there, I wanted to investigate. I didn't go to Xinjiang to have nice parties and to eat Chinese food and to see dancing girls and boys. But I wanted to understand what is going on in this country. So I had to struggle a lot with our Chinese friends and to demand consistently from them, sometimes even making them very nervous, to demand them to let me interview the people. It was very difficult. I did not have the chance to interview people in the street, and in many occasions in Aksu, but especially in Kashgar, when I tried together with other journalists, our friends from India, from Turkey, from Afghanistan, who wanted to investigate the real situation there, the Uyghurs were very much afraid to talk to us, and on the other hand, our Chinese friends did their best not to let us to talk to random people in the street. Anyhow, I tried to document as much as I could, and whenever they allowed me to film almost every detail of our visits in order to present to you people who see me from all over the world of what is going on in Xinjiang. So coming back to Wensi Country Vocational Training School, or the detention center or concentration camp, you call it whatever, when we went there we were shocked. Even though these people had their names, they had Muslim names, because I have to open the video and to recheck all their names. Even though they were Muslims, even though the reason why they were detained was because 1 or 2 years ago they had read the Quran, they had participated in a Quran class, they had prayed namaz at home or in the street, or they had put hijab. And for these things that are basic human rights for us in the West, they were detained like criminals in this center. They were imprisoned, let me use the term imprisoned better, in this center, and they were brainwashed in this center. Moreover, these people were made to feel guilty about being Muslim. When we went to the Wensi County Vocational Training School, I was giving salam alaikum to these poor boys and girls, and they were afraid to respond to my salam. They were telling to me, ni hao. And when I was asking them, are you Muslims? They were saying, no, we're not Muslims. They were Muslims in the past. They were imprisoned because they happened to be Muslims. They were imprisoned into these schools only because they chose to believe in Allah, to refused to eat haram things, but they wanted to eat halal things. They were imprisoned because one of the girls that I interviewed, she married through an imam in a religious ceremony with her husband, and only because she wanted to have to love her husband and to make love with her husband in halal religious way, she was imprisoned. But these people who were imprisoned because they were Muslims, now they were telling to us that they were no longer Muslims. They were brainwashed. I'll continue with the second part of this video.